So as we started last week, this is Akshara Brahma Yoga. So the word is very, very deep chapter, very subtle chapter also. So starts with Arjuna asking basic questions that was covered in the 7th chapter towards the end. What are certain terminologies, right? And we'll get into each one. We'll revise them again today also. Like what is Adhyatma, what is Brahma, what is Adi Bhuta, what is Adi Devata, what is Adi Yajna, what is it that has to be done at the time when you go, when death occurs. All of that questions that get asked, and it's going to get covered in the next few stanzas and towards the chapter, and some of it also into the following chapters. So first word that comes is word Akshara, right? We see the third stanza, Bhagavan uses the word Akshara. Akshara itself is a potent word. Akshara means the first thing that we have to understand, it is imperishable. So Akshara is perishable, Akshara is perishable. What is imperishable is that supreme divinity, is that Brahman. No, so this word Brahman is not new to us. We've heard it a lot. At least somewhere we understand it is the ultimate force that governs everything that exists. It is like the supreme director of this entire existence. We should not say the world, we should say existence, because world is just a limited perspective that we all have. We should say existence. It could span beyond what we consider as the world, right? So imperishable, all-pervading, unchangeable, stable, everything, right? So everything comes underneath that. So this was, when we looked at it, the last chapter also, right? There is something that is a total unchanging entity, etc. Then there is a changing aspect of it, which is the manifested forms, which we refer to as Prakriti, is what comes underneath all of this, and that's where all of these other things. Now, then there is something that dwells, there is also a divinity in each and every one of us. Now, this divinity is the same divinity that's outside, excepting that in the way it manifests itself, in the way we see it, there is a shade of impurities, imperfections are clouded, and hence, we don't see the essence of it inside. So that is referred to as Adhyatma. Adhyatma is the same presence of Brahman in every body, in every little mosquito also has the same Brahman. It is not that because it's so small, or even a little ant has got the same Brahman. So anything that exists, any physical entity, right? For that matter, even in a base of inert rock or a table, there is a Shakti. It is not that it is not moving, and hence it doesn't have the power it has. So in any physical entity, there is a formless subtle entity that is there, which shows up in some way or the other. So in a human being or a living being, it shows up very clearly, visibly outside. And many other inert things, what we consider as inert, it doesn't show up as much, but it shows up over a period of time. Let's say a rock that is there, after many years you see suddenly a plant coming out of it, or you see that it perishes, right? So all of those come under the perishable entities. All of us, we come under the perishable entities, and the imperishable, of course, is the Brahman. So for us we took this example of space. For us, the nearest understanding to look at how to look at this imperishable thing is space. Everything exists in space. There's nothing that doesn't exist in space, right? Each and every entity exists in space. You can't say that a space doesn't exist anywhere. Everywhere it pervades. So you can even look at, even if you take, for example, certain physical forms, right? Let's say you take a honey bee thing, right? There's a queen bee. That is a mother, that's a queen, that that is a supreme force under which all the worker bees do the actions. Now, the queen bee, if you notice, is totally, it doesn't do anything, it just sits there. But in its presence, only everything else works. The day the queen bee is not there, the worker bees don't do any work. So, like that, only in the presence of the supreme force or the Brahman, we are able to function. In our own body, only in the presence of Adhyatma, we are able to perform. Right? The day that consciousness leaves the body, none of our body functions are viable, not possible. So this was Brahman and Adi. Then there is also, Krishna talks about what is considered as work. In one of the stanzas, right? He refers to what is, if you see the stanza here, third stanza, karma sangitaha. What is work? Is called work. It says that, and I think Swami Chinmayananda and many Swamijis, they talk about this work as not something that we refer to as action. Something that is done where we realize that there is it's a manifestation of the inner energy that is meant for, benefiting somebody outside, useful for the society, useful for the people around you. That is what is referred to as work. It is not just simply doing an action. And we sort of took this example of so many living things that are around us, and what sort of action does each one of them perform. And the ones that have the most intelligence is the human being. Right? We took the example of plant, which only responds, an animal which only instinctively does the work, right? But the one which is supposed to work with a lot of discriminative power is the human being. Now it's another question whether we do everything with that discriminative power or not, but at least that's what it's meant to be. But yeah, sometimes the animal instinct comes in. At that time, we are more like an animal. Or where we just simply respond, without doing anything. We just are more like a vegetable rather than an intelligent human being. So this was another thing that was talked about. Then Adibhuta. Adibhuta is what? Adibhuta is all the things that are made up of the 5 elements, which is matter. Right, the water element, the earth element, everything, right? Everything that we see around the wood you see, that the table you're sitting in or the chair you're next to, etc. All of them come under the gamut of what is referred to as Adibhuta. So nature is Adibhuta, right? Everything in nature is Adibhuta. But this Adibhuta is governed by what? By Brahman. So we have to look at, therefore, so for us, for people to play in this world, we have to use Adibhuta as a way to show our gratitude towards the Brahman, isn't it? Because we cannot see Brahman, it's an unseeable entity, unperceivable entity. But for us, the closest that comes to it is all these manifestations, right? And that's the reason, if you look at all the things, especially in our Hindu culture, in terms of festivals, in terms of all the offerings that we do across the year, right? It is towards that nature, whether it is animal, everything from a snake to a cow, to many other living things that are pujas that are offered, right, throughout the year. Even the lion is given its mahatva, right, in Durga pujas. Tiger is given its significance, right, like that. So, Adibhuta. Then comes this what? Adi Yajna. This Adi Yajna, so there's 2-3 words here, right? Yajna. Yajna is what, normally we refer to as Yajna as a ritual. Swami Chinmayananda puts it in a very beautiful way. He says that, for example, whatever we do as rituals, right, which is what the normal typical Yajna comes under. Ritual is essentially a dramatization or an outer representation of actually spirituality. So let's look at it another way, right? So what is it that we do in all of this? We do some offerings, right? Offerings, Homa is not necessarily the only Yajna. If you look at, whenever you look at all these scriptural talks that are given by different mutts, Ramakrishna, Machimya Mission, etc., they refer to as Gita, Jnana, Yajna. Why is there word Yajna at the end of it? Because Yajna is a way to go inside yourself. It is to go to the center of our existence. That is the ultimate purpose of Yajna. But for that to happen, you have different means. Not everybody can just say, I'll go to the center of myself, right? Not everybody can sit and start meditating right away. For some people, you have to go through certain ritualistic things, right? You offer a puja, you do a homa, or you chanting, whatever it is, right? If you look at so many things, or even you go through some, austere practices that many people follow during Dasara time, right? It is take fasting, many things, all of them, discipline, all of that is meant to get into yourself, deeper into. That is what the ultimate goal of Yajna is. But then, when you look at from the outside world, right, we follow these things. So it is a means towards the end rather than the end itself. If you remember in the last chapter, there is a lot of word that Krishna talks about. Don't get carried away by just offering to the devatas, etc., right? Those are just intermediary. Ultimately, you have to reach me. So similarly here, if you look at the same thing here, right, we have to ultimately, when we have to go to the so-called Brahman that we are talking about earlier, all of these are means towards doing it. So rituals come under what we call in our culture as religion, right? Spirituality is beyond religion. I always look at, Gurudev gives this beautiful example, very beautiful example. You just take a banana that we all take every day, right, for fruit in the morning breakfast, right? That banana leaf is like the religion part. But you have to open up that banana and ultimately taste the sweet fruit inside, which is spirituality. So you need to go through that peel to peel it up, right? Whether it is a mango peel or a banana peel or whatever peel it is, right? You peel it up to get to the center of that sweetness. So, like you have to open the shell of a coconut to taste the amrit inside, right? Many examples are there. You can just relate to. So and these are all the things that we, deal with it every day. But ultimately, in Vedanta, the goal is spirituality. And towards that spirituality, which is going deep inside, many means are given. So all the sadhana practices, all the chanting, all the things that we do, and pretty much in all the pujas that we see throughout the year, starting from, Swargavasal, right, which we start early part of the year, right, Vaikuntha Ekadashi onwards to Sankranti to, New Year's Day, everything. Many things are there. What is always looked at is look at the symbolism behind it. One thing there is actually, the books written on symbolism itself, right? So one is what happens in, for example, during the time of this Navaratri, right? Many people chant Devi Mahatmya. Devi Mahatmya talks about, initial chapters talks about so many of what, Kali or Durga, how she got rid of many asuras. Now, what are each of those asuras? One is from a story standpoint, very good to tell the children. But as Vedantis, right, or as seekers, right, we have to understand, get to the deeper aspect of what each of those represent. That each of those asuras represent certain impurities in each and every one of us that we have to get rid of. Right? And it is that impurity, again, it is the Devi that's going to do that. So from the outside, it looks like a asura. But inside, right, there is definitely certain impurities. And these are impurities that are covering this adhyatmic part that we referred to earlier. So, another aspect to look at it from in all these terms, right, is in all the chantings that we do or any prayers we do, at the end of it we say Om Shanti Shanti 3 times. Even in this meditation also. Let there be peace, let there be peace, let there be peace. Why do we say it 3 times? These terminologies come into play. So whenever you look at peace, right, you just look at peace for yourself for now, right? Right? There is somewhere totally out of the blue, there's an earthquake that happens somewhere, or there is a tsunami that happens somewhere, or even this COVID that came out of the blue with no notice whatsoever, right? Totally outside our control. These are what are referred to as Adi Daivata. These are celestial forces, or like eclipses. Let's talk about lunar eclipse or solar eclipses. Each one of them are very powerful, and yet they have a certain governance into what it does to our body, it does to our mind, isn't it? Outside our control, Adi Daivata. Then comes something that is closer to us, your own neighbor, or the pollution around your house, or pollution in your neighborhood, your friend circle, your neighborhood circle, all of that. These are made up of what? Bhutas, Adi Bhutas. So, somebody is, always shouting, somebody is always making, your traffic around you is pretty bad, things like that, right? All of this, what does it come under? Adi Daivata. And then comes what is within you, which is Adhyatmika. The Adhyatmika part is your own mind, right? So the impurities in my mind, right? My tendency to get, short-tempered, anger, or my tendency to have jealousy, envy, etc. Those are also barriers. So all of these are barriers to what? To peace. One is the outside force. You and I cannot do much about it. The second is something you can do. You can move from one neighborhood to the other, etc., to take care of the second one to some extent. But the third one is totally under our control. So if you look at all the things that is covered in Bhagavad Gita, this talks about all the scriptures, you and I can't do anything about the first and the second to a large extent, but we have total say in what we can do with the third one. Yes? So all the Kriya practices, all the meditations, all of them, right, is despite those things that are, even for that matter, second one, I can still have a say with what I can do to my own inner peace. Right? My neighbor is shouting at me, so why should I get totally upset by it? Right? I can still handle it. So the sources of lack of peace coming from Adibhuta or Adhyatmika is totally under my say. So these are essentially the first 4 stanzas. If you see, a short answer to those couple of questions that Arjuna asked. Then comes a topic of death. So starting from the 5th stanza for about 5-6 stanzas, the topic of death comes up. The word death is always something that is a touchy topic, right? In most families, you talk about death, they say, don't talk about it, right? I remember, when the topic of death, somebody passes away, right? And you ask the question to your parents. I'm talking about not as a child, but even as a grown up. You say, no, it's not the time to talk about it. We have a happy life to live, etc., etc. But, the more as seekers we understand what death is, that's what Gurudev says, the better prepared we are in our own life, how to live the life. And that's what these stanzas talk about. So, to answer one of the questions that Arjuna asked, what should the mental, what should the person do at the time of death? Krishna gives a very simple answer, but it's a very deep answer. He simply says that whenever you leave the body, right, but if you remember me at the time you leave the body, at the time of death, you will reach me. And he says there is absolutely no doubt about it. Just so clear, no doubt about it. That means what? Certainly you're going to reach me if you think of me at the time of death. That's all that he says. So what does it say? Now, the way to look at this is, think of our day-to-day routine, right? In the 24 hours that we have every day, we go to sleep, right? So Gurudev says very beautifully that whatever the last thought that you go to sleep with, the last thought is the same first thought that comes to you the next day morning. It is bound to happen. There's no doubt over it. You just have to, sometimes, you'll see this when you just realize, right? Whatever thoughts or feelings or emotions that you go in with when you go to sleep, or the last thought that comes before you go to sleep is the first thought that comes. The same thing applies also to death. So whatever thought I had when I leave the body, I come with the same thing when I come into the next body. So that Antakali means what? The first word that comes in that stanza is Antakali, at the end. Now this stanza has got multiple meanings to it, right? So Swamiji gives one example. You look at a gun, right? You take a gun, for example, right? The gun is pointing at a particular destination. Let's say, something has to be hit by the gun, right? So you place the barrel in the direction of that particular target and you press the button, right? And it hits it, isn't it? So wherever you are putting your intention, it manifests. That's the way to look at it. So wherever, so there is a saying in our life itself, right? Whatever you think, you become that. You think you are what your thoughts are. There is a word, tathastu, that is used in our culture. What is tathastu? I think positively, it will manifest. If I think negatively, it will also manifest. Right? So, something, I should not feel, I should not, I hope, if you say that I need to get better and you pray that way, that is offered, that is manifests itself. The more I think, hope I don't get bad, this doesn't happen, I should get this, or think badly about others. So whatever the last thought that one has at the, that is how the thought comes. Those are the same things that manifest in the next life. Now this will get, more clarity will come on these in the following stanzas. There is another angle to this stanza also, right? That Adi Shankara, this is one of the stanzas that is the most controversial, less understood, the most, given the most amount of commentaries in many scriptures by many authors. Antakale, Kale means what? Time. Right? So end of time. What does end of time mean? One is to say end of time, I leave this body, that is end of time. That is one way to look at it. But where does the question of time comes even in our present life? Right? So if you look at it, time as a concept is what? From point A to point B, right? There is one event to the next event, there is time, isn't it? So, and that time comes on because of my mind, because of my body, mind and intellect. I'm constantly visualizing the so-called time. Now let's look at what happens when we go into meditation. Right? When you're in, you've chanted something or you've done some, 1008 times you've done some parayana and you close your eyes in your meditation. That there are times when there are instances where there is no concept of time. You go beyond time. So this stanza talks about not at the time of death that what happens. It is in the time when you're alive, your body is functioning, but you're gone beyond the concept of that time. But the time concept comes because of our mind is constantly in the thinking process. But when does mind go for a toss? Is when you're in deep meditation, right? And that's the reason when you look at meditation, sometimes you don't realize how much time you have taken. You might have just spent 10 minutes. You think you've just closed your eyes for 10 minutes, but 30 minutes, 45 minutes have gone. What does that tell you? That somewhere in between there was no concept of time at all. So you went beyond time. So what Krishna is saying here also is that that when we go into meditation, right, when we meditate steadily, right, we go beyond the body, mind and intellect. And when we go beyond the body, mind and intellect, and even that ego that is always springing up whenever you're in the waking state, you go deep into blissful state. What is that deep blissful state? You are in touch with your inner Antyatma. Right? When we are in that so-called blissful state, even for a few seconds, or even a second, right? We are actually, the word he uses, right? You reach me. There is no doubt about it. He's talking about that state. Okay. So, where you have, less of a pleasant feeling, just somewhere you are in a nothingness. You don't realize you're sitting with your body there. You've gone beyond the body. Even though you may be hearing things outside, right? It's not that it's not that you're sleeping, etc. Right? You're totally aware of everything around you, and yet at the same time, the concept of body and mind and intellect have gone. That state of inner samadhi, as we refer to, Sage Patanjali uses the word samadhi for it. Right? There are multiple samadhis that are possible. That samadhi, what is in the state of samadhi that happens? You are in touch with your inner self. That is what is also referred to in this particular stanza. So you see, right? So sometimes, and the word death itself, if you see, right, Gurudev puts it another way. We think that, only when we die, we are dying. Every second, your body is dying. Cells are dying constantly. Every second, there are a few thousand cells that are dying, and a few thousand cells are getting born. You're dead and being born every time, every few seconds. We are not even aware of it, because from the outside, everything appears as though nothing has happened. But inside, you're actually dying and living, dying and reborn, dying and reborn. Yeah, but from a Vedantic perspective, we don't do that, pay attention to it. What we want to pay attention, it's our growth, right? So we want to look at it from still the outer angle. That's where all these meditations and other things comes in. So, now going into the next few stanzas, he goes deeper, right? He says that, at the end of it, whatever thought you had at the end of when your body leaves is what you become. Now, he's not saying about reaching me. He says whatever thoughts you have. So Gurudev will give an example. Supposing somebody is working as a veterinarian in a poultry farm, and he's so kind to the chickens that are there, and he says, wow, and he constantly thinks of the chicken, and the chicken, mindset is there constantly. There is a good possibility that the person dies, he'll be born as a chicken. So whatever thoughts are dominant in one's life, right, and that's what manifests also when you leave the body, you become that. Right. So this sentence is very powerful. Huh? What we talked about this night, right? Going to sleep and whatever thought you have manifests itself the next morning. So our scriptures say that every night, right, the sleep is essentially a mini death. Every night sleep is actually a mini death. How many of us look at it that way? If you look at the statistics around the world, right, many people do not wake up from sleep. Yes or no? Irrespective of age. They might have had a seizure, or it was just time, that they have to leave the body, they left in their sleep. They don't wake up. So we all take it for granted that, we're going to wake up the next morning, etc., and we have 10, 100 things to do, etc. So what is the mindset that we need to have in our day-to-day life, right? The fact that I'm existing now, I'm living now. There's certain things I have to do, certain purposes that I have to do, etc., etc. That is what, we have to look at. And in all of this, right, remember the last stanza, the last chapter, the word Maya came into the question in many stanzas. We have to realize that Maya is what? Maya is again what appears as an illusion, right? We get caught by the fact that things that are in front of us that we have so much of grudge about are all permanent. Not realizing that they are changing. People around us are changing. I am changing. The situations and circumstances around my house, my business, my work, my company, right? The so-called advent of AI that we see here, all looks like illusion. A few years back, no big deal. But today it is a reality, isn't it? But that also will change 10 years from now to something else, right? So, AI is going to bring a lot of things, there's so much of talk about that whole thing, right? But it all comes under the so-called perishable things, right? So the whole purpose in all of these, if you see this chapter, a lot of these terminologies, is to get to that unperishable. So one of the things that, all our scriptures say is certain things, how we transact in the world. And one of the things that we transact in the world is to what we say. So there is a beautiful, Gurudev talks about this one. There is in one of our early scriptures, Manusmriti, there is a beautiful saying, how you should speak. There it says, Satyam Bhruyat, Priyam Bhuyat, Bruhat Apramiyam, na Bruhat Apramiyam. I'll first tell you what some of these mean. We'll go into it a little later also in the next class because we're running out of time. So the first thing it says is speak the truth. Speak Satyam Bruyat means speak the truth. Right? Then Priyam hi Bruyat means speak which is pleasant. Then it says do not speak the unpleasant truth. And the fourth one, it says, do not speak pleasant untruth. A lot of things to ponder here. And some of us will debate on this one. We'll debate this also. Speak the truth. Truth means what? There is only one truth. Truth here means what is the fact. Truth, so here in all of this, right, we should not get carried away. Speak truth means I say, pleasant means I should say with a lot of smile and, very wishy-washy, sweet talk. That's not what is talked about here. Speak the truth means you have to tell the fact in a very clear term, but not using abusive language. Unpleasant means not abusive language. Pleasant can be still talked about in a manner that the message gets across to that person, depending on who it is. You do something different with a child, you say the same truth to a person of your age, and you say the same thing to somebody that's elder to you. And this is where the next one comes. Do not speak unpleasant truth. This is a very touchy topic, right? Let's say that, some death has happened in the family. Your mother or your father is in the sick bed. Right? Do you speak the full truth to that person? It says, do not speak unpleasant truth. That means what? You don't say the clear facts to them, such and such a person, is in hospital, ICU, blah, 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 to that person, given the state of the person to whom you're talking. Right? So, this I remember, it comes in very, we all realize it, right? Let's say that, we stay away from certain things. Especially certain things, very sensitive topics to some people, especially close ones, because it may, put them into depression, etc., etc. So we just put it in a different way. We convey it or we don't say it. Right? So do not speak the unpleasant truth. And then the last one is do not speak pleasant untruth. That means what? Don't wish-wash what the truth is. Be very clear. So we'll talk more about this in the next class. We'll stop here. Maybe we'll get some thoughts from each and every one of you. Any thoughts, Nirmala ji, Bhavani ji, Shalini, Jairam? Yeah, but we have to be careful, Jairam sir. Wherever it has to be said, it has to be done. No? So sometimes we shy away from saying this also to people. Let's say that you have a son or a daughter, and she or she is not studying well, etc. Certain facts have to be told to that person. You can't just postpone it to another time, etc. Right? A good time. If it has to be said, it's just a fact. What it says is, say it in a way that the message gets across to them. Yeah. But before that, the topic of death itself, anybody wants to reflect on that or say whatever you have thoughts on? It's going to get talked about in the following stanza. We'll talk about that's a very valid point. A lot of people will have that question. It's a good one, right, Bhavani? Definitely. Baseline empathy. A few more stanzas are there, and some of this will get some answers from that also. Shalini, anything from your side?